Hello again, welcome to the channel. Of course, I'll be going over really debunking the notion that Anakin is more powerful than Vader in Star Wars canon. So any legends, sources or materials that gives any input as to who is more powerful than the other will not apply to this video or Star Wars canon, as the narrative in both continuities is extremely different, especially surrounding the character of Vader, as he is a completely different character in canon compared to legends, both in terms of power level as well as what the story does with him. But before I get into that, please like, share, subscribe. I apologize for not uploading very consistently. I've been extremely busy with university and stuff, but I still try to upload every week or every other week when I get the chance. But I plan on uploading far more consistently during semester breaks, as I will have way more time and most likely even upload on a daily basis. With that said, let's begin. Right, so before I actually get into what canon says in terms of the comics, the story, the narrative, in terms of who is more powerful, I just want to debunk something concerning G-canon, as G-canon is often used to downplay Vader or argue that Anakin is more powerful than Vader. The thing about G-canon is it no longer holds nearly as much weight in Star Wars canon, as confirmed by the Lucasfilm writers and story group, who oversee all aspects of the current Star Wars canon and have the highest authority presently in terms of what direction Disney Star Wars is taking with its stories and characters, with them outright stating that they are trying to replace G-canon completely with a new tiering system that's much more cohesive and linear, which makes sense given George Lucas is no longer in control of Star Wars and therefore no longer has the final say in terms of the stories, writing, or by extension scaling for that matter. Basically put, G-canon holds weight unless directly contradicted by material put out by the new Star Wars canon or writers' statements, which would of course apply to Vader, since Vader in canon is extremely different to what George's original vision of Vader was in Legends. This could be broken down into three categories: Vader's suit, his mentality, and his potential. Firstly, Vader's suit in Legends is a massive hamper to him because of mechanisms placed by Sidious to hinder his movements or weaknesses to lightning, for example. Right? However, these hindrances that massively affected Vader's combative ability in Legends no longer apply to canon, as this was completely retconned by the Vader 2017 comics, with Vader having complete reign and autonomy to upgrade or design his suit to whatever his desires or specifications, which happens almost right after Revenge of the Sith. And as such, he's a much more dangerous combatant in Star Wars canon, as he no longer has those same mechanisms that held him back as his Legends counterpart does, and it really shows in his speed feats, right? Such as how he's consistently able to react and even hold his own against Sidious's speed on multiple occasions, even whilst insanely weakened due to having his connection to the dark side completely compromised after the events of Empire Strikes Back. He is still able to defend against Sidious's attacks. His mentality is also much stronger, as it's consistently the narrative in all of Vader's comics that he initially has some sort of conflict hindering him, but overcomes said conflict almost completely by the end of these stories, emerging stronger than ever each time he overcomes more and more mental hindrances. This is a consistent theme in all of the comics, whether it's the 2015, 2017 or 2020 run. For example, in the 2017 run, we see that Vader, when he tries to bleed his Kyber crystal, has a vision of turning back to the light side, of killing the Emperor, of finding Kenobi and apologizing for everything he had done. But he resists this conflict and emerges a Sith Lord. A perfect example of this is also in the presently ongoing Vader series, which takes place between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, with Vader starting off being completely mortified at Luke's refusal to join him, going on an entire journey trying to find all who had kept Luke a secret from him, who had kept Padme's pregnancy and, her birth of Luke a secret, and This leads to Vader's connection to the dark side being completely compromised, with Sidious being surprised that Vader is still even capable of defending against a single attack, which really goes to show how much his connection to the dark side had been compromised, how weakened he is in this state. And as a result, Sidious literally breaks him down in every sense of the word, physically, mentally, and at the end of this run, Vader has to rebuild his connection completely to the dark side, and he emerges stronger than ever. His mentality is completely changed. He no longer sees Luke as an asset. Instead, he sees Luke as both a liability and a threat to his position. So now he wants to kill Luke, which bleeds perfectly into the narrative of Return of the Jedi, which, as explained in my How Powerful is Luke Skywalker video, Vader has absolutely no problems killing his own son. He isn't conflicted when it comes to doing that, and this run really shows it, as it starts off with this inner conflict that he struggles with, and presently he is completely willing to kill his own son. And Vader no longer sees Luke as a necessity when it comes to killing the Emperor. In fact, he is instead biding his time to kill the Emperor himself, to one day surpass the Emperor, which bleeds perfectly into the final category, which is potential. Vader retains much more of his original potential in the new Star Wars canon, especially compared to his Legends counterpart, as there are statements directly saying that he still has the greatest potential of any Jedi and Sith. There's another statement saying he's the most powerful Sith Lord of all time. Of course, I don't consider him more powerful than Sidious, but I do think that all of these statements speak to potential. There's also further statements within the same Vader comics that say he may one day surpass the Emperor himself, and a writer's statement saying that Sidious is afraid of Vader's potential, with Vader being described almost as a beast waiting to overcome his Sith master. Despite his injuries, Sidious still considers him a legitimate Sith apprentice, surpassing all his previous apprentices, being stated multiple times to be the most powerful of all of them, even by light years, to really show how much more powerful he is compared to them. And Count Dooku, for example, has held his own against Yoda, or even gave Anakin himself, a very good fight, and Vader being stated to be way ahead of these characters, and it adds even more context to Empire Strikes Back in a completely new and unique way in the context of canon, given that Sidious's initial response to knowing about Luke is for Vader to kill him, and in the context of canon it makes even more sense because Vader is already a legitimate Sith apprentice. So even though yes, Luke is the better option, Vader is already a legitimate apprentice anyway. He already has that potential to surpass Sidious, so Sidious doesn't necessarily need Luke as an apprentice. It's simply the better option. That's why his initial response was for Vader just to kill Luke, instead of going through any sort of drama to try to convert him. This directly contradicts George Lucas's statement that Vader is 80% of the Emperor's power and has lost that potential to surpass him that Anakin once had. So again, it's consistently the narrative that Vader in Star Wars canon is much different to what George Lucas's original vision was, and the writers of the new canon have made Vader into a completely new character. He isn't a shadow of his former self like in Legends, and in fact gets stronger and stronger, which I'll get to soon. So as per statements from Pablo Hidalgo, Vader's prime starts from Rebels.
This is Vader in his prime. You gotta remember how far we've come from the character when he was Anakin. He has so buried the good person that he was.
What makes Ahsoka so dangerous, because if she were to figure out, or if she already knows who Darth Vader is, it's a big threat to him because it's like revealing these horrible truths.
She is a tie to who he was as Anakin Skywalker. And as Anakin Skywalker, someone he wants to forget ever existed.
If you had a top 5 list of who does Darth Vader want to destroy, you have Obi-Wan Kenobi number 1, and then it's probably really close between Yoda and Ahsoka.
A good way that the writers show when Vader's prime starts is also determined by how much of Anakin still remains in him, as the Vader that we see in the original trilogy is a much more calm and calculating character than Anakin, and that's what the transition between pre-prime and prime Vader is all about. One still clings to his past to a greater degree, whereas the other is more concerned with killing it completely, hence why the Vader of Rebels is fully willing to kill his former apprentice Ahsoka, which is further confirmed by Dave Filoni himself, who states that,
and when he says, we need not be adversaries, the Emperor will show you mercy, right? Well, that is more what, Jimmy, you're referring to, which is the lie.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lie. There's no way the Emperor is going to show her mercy. No way.
But
and
does
she
Anakin
knows
believe
that.
it? Does Anakin think that he might?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that Vader wants to destroy these people. You have to remember that Darth Vader is a different person than Anakin Skywalker at the end of the day. He knows she means Anakin Skywalker, but he says Anakin Skywalker's weak, and I destroyed him.
and it's why Kenobi series Vader, who people often use to downplay him, is not in his prime yet, as he still clings to his past to a greater degree, which is confirmed by what the Emperor tells him concerning his connection to the past weakening and preventing him from being as powerful as he should be. Hence why Vader seems much more impulsive and erratic within the Kenobi series, very much in the same manner as Anakin, rather than the calm nature that we see him with later on in the original trilogy. Even then, despite being pre-prime Vader in the Kenobi series, Obi-Wan still needs a significant arm to defeat Vader, as when his power from rods had returned, he was still no match for the Dark Lord, with Kenobi finding a greater source of power in his love and will to protect what remains of Anakin's legacy. A source of power that boosted him significantly enough to finally overcome Vader. In fact, I would argue that this adds even more to Vader's power, as he isn't even in his prime, yet is still beyond someone on the level of Revenge of the Sith Kenobi, a very powerful Jedi in his own right. So it was always going to happen that if Kenobi and Vader were to fight, that Kenobi would have to win, given the statement in A New Hope. I always knew even before watching Kenobi series that Kenobi would have had to win the fight one way or another, because the entire narrative behind Kenobi series is that Vader isn't in his prime yet, as given the statement in A New Hope.
The circle is now complete. When I left you, I was but a learner. Now I am the master.
And therefore, of course, in order to keep this statement as relevant and keep the continuity, the writers of Kenobi series, who would have Vader and Kenobi meet between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, would have to use a pre-prime version of Vader in order for the statement to make sense. And there are multiple statements from Lords of the Sith saying, his injuries had deformed his body, left it broken, but they had perfected his spirit, strengthening his connection to the Force. Suffering had birthed insight. Further supported by the armor separated him from the galaxy, from everyone, made him singular, freed him from the needs of the flesh, the concerns of the body that once had plagued him, and allowed him to focus solely on his relationship to the Force. When man and machine were one, he no longer felt the absence of his legs or arms, the pain of his flesh, but the hate remained and the rage still burned. Those he never relinquished, and he had never felt more connected to the Force than when his fury burned. All of these statements painting a very clear narrative that Vader has grown much more powerful in his suit, and in fact the suit has actually given him some advantages in regard to his ability to connect with the Force and focus on that connection to an almost exclusive manner. In the Tarkin novel it says, Tarkin had witnessed numerous Jedi wield lightsabers during the Clone Wars, but he had never seen anyone put an energy blade to such determined purpose or achieve such rapid and lethal results. So again, a direct comparison between Vader and Anakin, as Tarkin has been in battles with Anakin before. And in this very same novel, Sidious tells Vader that his power is unparalleled. The writers of Star Wars canon really outdid themselves, and even went so far to showcase Vader's superiority over Anakin that they literally made a Vader and Anakin fight in the Vader 2015 series, which takes place before Empire Strikes Back, to showcase the very clear superiority of one over the other, with Vader taking Anakin down with mid-difficulty. This is further supported by the very same comic series having the writer description saying, Vader would ultimately purge the last vestiges of Anakin from his psyche and emerge stronger than ever, and Vader himself stating that he grows more powerful with each step that he takes since the events of Wrath. Charles Soule himself, the writer of Vader's comics, the lead writer in fact, has stated that he considers suited Vader as more dangerous and a scary opponent to deal with than Nightfall Vader. Statements that places Vader not only above Anakin, but also above Nightfall Vader, or Priesthood Vader as some like to call him, who is much more powerful than Anakin and received power growth 3 times, the first being when he embraces the dark side as a Sith, the second when he kills all the Jedi in the temple, and the third after having killed all the separatist leaders on Mustafar. This version of Vader was already in the Yoda and Revenge of the Sith Sidious tier in power, and Vader is even more powerful than this version of himself. After Empire Strikes Back, he gets an even greater power jump after rebuilding his connection to the Force, emerging stronger than ever, going from being completely terrified of the Emperor to being confident he can challenge and defeat him. Though Sidious shows Vader who is the true Sith Master, this is because of Sidious's own massive power growth since Revenge of the Sith, as well as Vader not having a full grasp on how much more powerful his master was in the 2-decade gap since then, and most likely estimated that his master was at least around the power level of his Wrath's incarnation. This is supported by the fact that Sidious played a much more active role in Vader's training, much closer to Revenge of the Sith, such as in brief sparring sessions which we see in a comic that takes place very shortly after Wrath's, or in the Hidden Empire's latest release where Sidious outright admits that he hasn't used his lightsaber in a very long time, again supporting what I've been saying concerning him playing a far more active role in Vader's training very early on compared to the 2-decade gap since, and it would make a lot more sense as to why Vader did not know how much more powerful his master since then, and the only thing he would have had to compare to was to how he remembered Sidious to be. And the Lords of the Sith novel, which only takes place 5 years after. In this novel, Vader notes how Sidious was showing so little of his true power the whole time, directly implying that Vader had a very good grasp on how powerful his master, at least assuming that he's relative to his Wrath's incarnation, how powerful Wrath Sidious truly was to make such a conclusion. So narratively, this means that Vader, who had challenged Sidious, having a solid gauge on how powerful his Wrath's incarnation was at least, would have most likely surpassed this version of his master, only being disappointed to find out that Sidious had massively grown in power since then. So Vader in canon has definitely surpassed Anakin, Nightfall Vader, and Revenge of the Sith Darth Sidious. Right, so all of this really pointing to his power growth. He did not know Sidious's full power until this specific comic run because of the 2-decade gap, since Revenge of the Sith is supported many times within the same comic series, stating that Vader has now experienced the Emperor's renewed power, or his true power again. Early suit Vader was able to literally hold open the rift in the dark dimension into the Force itself, a realm far beyond time, you know, and it really shows this feat could even be scaled to Outer Versal. Lord Mormon being able to bring back his physical body from centuries earlier in this feat. Vader in this same feat was able to shake the entire surface of the planet of Mustafar with the residual energy, implying that the energy that he actually tanked would have been far beyond the energy that was shaking the planet, as that was the residual energy. So Vader in canon is definitely, you know, everything points to him being this beast. You know, he has grown beyond his limits, he has surpassed them, he has become something else entirely. This is the narrative, and the narrative for him is one of a true Dark Lord of the Sith. You know, his mastery of the Force, you know, he's a true master of the dark side, even of Sith sorcery, able to keep the Grand Inquisitor's spirit from, you know, passing on, and he traps his spirit in the Jedi Temple, for example. His Force pushes and waves are capable of destroying the exoskeletons of Lilac, seriously damaging and even removing limbs. These same creatures are able to tank blasts like it's nothing, and even withstand lightsaber wounds to a degree. He has slain the Ender, a beast that is casually able to destroy entire cities and possibly even continental in overall scaling. he has tanked the full power of the Final Order fleet, at least star level in potency, given that it's well over 1,000 ships that the Final Order is made up of, each ship being capable of destroying an entire planet, you know, so at least star system, solar system level, and Ahsoka in Rebels was able to defend against an attack from this very same Sidious, so also at least star system in terms of power. And this Sidious, as stated already, has grown massively in power since Revenge of the Sith, so Ahsoka was able to briefly defend against an attack from a much more powerful version of that Sidious, and Vader beat this Ahsoka. So again, it's kinda, especially given everything went through, it's kinda impossible not to say that Vader is beyond Anakin at this point, right? And he gets even more and more powerful, because this is Rebels Vader. Vader gets more and more powerful. By Return of the Jedi, he's at his absolute peak, so far above this power level he was at already by Star Wars Rebels. Vader himself even says that he has grown so much more powerful in the ongoing comic series that he's beyond what old Ben would have ever imagined him to be. He's more powerful than old Ben's imagination. And Yoda, for example, flat out tells Kenobi that he would never be a real match for Sidious, implying that no matter how much training or meditation or wisdom or power growth that Kenobi may ever attain, at least according to Yoda, that he would never be able to match the Emperor. So this statement again further puts Vader at least at this level of power, though as stated already, he's beyond what Revenge of the Sith Sidious is. Vader in canon, it's an entirely different ballgame, an entirely different narrative concerning what he's capable of, concerning where he scales within his verse. With that said, I bring this video to a close, but before I go, just remember to like, share and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate any support. May the Force be with you, and have a nice one.